Olivia Liv Bennett never imagined that defending a cup of specialty coffee would result in the most transformative encounter of her life on that crisp autumn morning in Stowe, Vermont. As the aroma of freshly roasted beans filled the Birchwood Cafe, she found herself staring into the most intimidating and surprisingly magnetic eyes she had ever seen. The man in the impeccable suit in front of her seemed determined to test her patience, questioning absolutely everything from the water temperature to the origin of the beans. "Sir, with all due respect, I have 5 years of experience as a barista. If you want better coffee in this town, good luck finding it," she snapped, drawing shocked glances from the other customers. What Liv didn't know was that this impossible customer was not only Miles Vaughn, the secret owner of the establishment, but also someone who had just discovered his new obsession, winning the heart of the only person who had dared to challenge him in years. "An interesting approach with dissatisfied customers," he commented with an enigmatic smile, leaving a generous tip before walking out. Liv rolled her eyes, relieved to be rid of the irritating man, never imagining that fate was already weaving complex plans to unite their lives in unexpected ways. The Birchwood Cafe was Liv's refuge, a cozy place where her passion for the culinary arts found expression. She had landed the job just 6 months ago, after moving to live with her Aunt Clara in the neighboring town. The Bennett family inheritance amounted to an exceptional talent in the kitchen and a legendary stubbornness, both of which Liv had in abundance. "You won't believe the arrogant customer I just dealt with," she commented to Beatrice, her fellow barista, while cleaning the espresso machine. "He questioned literally everything as if he were some kind of expert. Liv, you need to control that temper of yours. You never know who someone might be," Beatrice replied nervously. "Oh, please. If he were anyone important, he would have had me fired already." Liv laughed, not noticing the worried look Frank, the manager, shot in her direction from across the counter. Meanwhile, Miles Vaughn was walking into his luxurious office in the city's downtown business district. At 34, he had transformed a small cafe inherited from his grandfather into a successful chain of franchises spread across the Northeast. The Birchwood Cafe was his most recent jewel, acquired just a few months prior, which he visited discreetly without revealing his identity. "Luke, I need the files on all employees at the Birchwood," he asked his assistant as he loosened his tie. "Is there a problem, sir?" Luke asked, surprised by the sudden request. "On the contrary," Miles smiled, looking out the panoramic window that offered a view of the Vermont mountains. "I've just found something money can't buy: authenticity." That same night, Liv arrived exhausted at the house she shared with her Aunt Clara, a woman of 60 with the spirit of a 20-year-old. She found her in the backyard adjusting a dress that looked like it came straight from a Victorian ball. "Don't tell me you have another one of your themed meetups?" Liv asked, dropping her bag on the worn-out sofa. "Changed into something more comfortable, my dear? Life is too short not to have fun," Clara replied, twirling in the dress. "And speaking of fun, some mail arrived for you." "It looks interesting." Liv opened the envelope curiously. It was an invitation to an all-expenses-paid sommelier course. "There must be some mistake," she murmured. "This must cost a fortune." "Read the note," Clara insisted, adjusting the reading glasses on her face. "Your passion for quality deserves to be developed. We expect you this Monday?" Liv read aloud. "There's no return address." Who would send this? What Liv didn't know was that on the other side of town, Miles was petting his Siamese cat Simba while contemplating the sunset. "Now let's see if she's as demanding with wine as she is with coffee," he murmured to the purring feline. The following Monday, Liv hesitantly entered the elegant building where the course was held. Dressed in her best clothes, she still felt out of place among people clearly accustomed to luxury. When the door to the tasting room opened, her heart nearly stopped. There he was, the impossible customer, smiling as if he had been waiting for her. "Welcome to the world of wine. Ms. Bennett," Miles said, approaching with 2 glasses. "I hope you'll be less critical of the Merlot than you were of my coffee." The realization hit Liv like a lightning bolt. You set this all up?" "Let's just say I invested in someone who clearly values quality," he replied, handing her a glass. "And I'm curious to find out just how far that valuation goes." Liv accepted the glass, feeling she was about to embark on something much bigger than a simple wine course. What she didn't know was how much her life would change in the coming weeks and the price her heart would pay for it. Liv stared at the wine glass in her hand and then at the man in front of her. Up close, Miles Vaughn seemed even more intimidating and annoyingly attractive. Dark hair perfectly styled, hazel green eyes that seemed to read her thoughts, and a smile that hovered between confidence and something she couldn't decipher. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked directly, ignoring the manners her aunt so insisted upon. "If this is to fire me, there's a normal procedure for that." Miles laughed, a genuine sound that caught her off guard. "If I wanted to fire you, Ms. Bennett, a dismissal letter would be far more economical than a 6-week sommelier course." "Then what is this? Some kind of social experiment? See how the temperamental barista behaves among the fancy people?" Liv raised the glass, studying the ruby liquid against the light. "I prefer to call it an investment in untapped potential," he answered, his eyes never leaving hers. "I saw something rare in that argument over coffee, a passion for excellence. It's the same passion that built my empire." The instructor interrupted the conversation, beginning the class. For the next 2 hours, Liv discovered that the world of wine was as complex and fascinating as that of coffee, with nuances she was only beginning to understand. To her surprise, Miles proved to be an attentive and humble student, asking intelligent questions and occasionally seeking her opinion. "For someone who owns a chain of cafes, you know surprisingly little about wine," Liv commented as the class ended, while she packed up her notes. "It's never too late to learn something new," he replied enigmatically. "Join me for dinner? We can discuss our impressions of the class." Liv hesitated. Everything about Miles screamed danger. His posture, his calculated charm, the ease with which he seemed to get whatever he wanted. He was her boss, after all. But there was something else, a curiosity she couldn't ignore. "A professional dinner," she established, grabbing her bag. "Naturally," he agreed, with a glint in his eye that suggested the exact opposite. The restaurant Miles chose was elegant without being pretentious. While they enjoyed a carpaccio appetizer, she discovered that he lived with his father, Arthur, in a house next to the Birchwood Cafe. "And your father doesn't mind having a millionaire son living with him?" she asked, genuinely curious. "My father thinks true luxury is companionship," Miles replied with an affectionate smile. "After my mother passed away, we promised never to grow distant. Besides, he has enough fantastic stories to entertain an entire city." "Fantastic stories?" "My father firmly believes that every person carries a universe within them. He collects these stories and retells them with creative embellishments." Miles smiled. "What about you?" "I heard you live with your aunt." Liv was surprised by the information he had. "Have you been investigating my life, Mr. Vaughn?" "I know all my employees," he answered smoothly. "Yes, I live with Aunt Clara, ever since my parents decided to spend a year traveling through Europe. She's eccentric, has an obsession with period-themed parties. Right now, she's probably dancing a waltz in some ballroom, pretending to be a 19th century duchess." "Sounds fascinating." "It's embarrassing," Liv corrected, but her smile betrayed the affection she felt for her aunt. "But she took me in when I needed a fresh start." The conversation flowed surprisingly well. Liv learned that Miles had built his empire from a single cafe inherited from his grandfather, expanding into a network of franchises that now included restaurants and specialty shops. He spoke of business with passion, but without the arrogance she had expected. "What brought you into the world of coffee?" Miles asked as the waiter served dessert. Liv hesitated. It was a simple question, but the answer wasn't. "Freedom," she said finally. "I grew up in a family where everything was planned. Which college I would attend, what career I would pursue. Coffee was my small rebellion." "And your parents accepted this?" "Rebellion? Let's just say the trip to Europe is also a way of dealing with the disappointment of having a barista daughter instead of a lawyer," she replied with a slight bitterness in her voice. When dinner ended, Miles insisted on driving her home. In the luxurious car, Liv felt strangely comfortable, despite everything that separated them. "Why did you really invite me to this course?" she asked as they parked in front of her aunt's house. "And don't give me that untapped potential story." Miles turned to face her, his face partially lit by the streetlights. For a moment, the mask of the confident businessman seemed to fall. "Because you fascinate me, Liv Bennett. You serve me coffee as if you're doing me a favor. You look at my empire as if it's just another business, and you argue with me as if we're equals." He paused. It's refreshing to meet someone who isn't interested in what I can offer. Maybe you're just used to the wrong kind of people, Liv replied, opening the car door. But before she could get out, Miles gently took her wrist. Monday same time? He asked, referring to the next class. Liv should have said no. She should have set clear boundaries. She should have remembered that he was her boss and that nothing good could come of this. Instead, she heard herself say, "Don't be late." As she watched Miles's car disappear into the night, Liv didn't notice her aunt watching from the window with a knowing smile on her face. Finally, something more interesting than my period parties, Clara murmured to herself, letting the curtain fall gently. The following weeks passed in an almost surreal rhythm for Liv. By day, she remained the efficient barista at the Birchwood Cafe, now acutely aware that her every move was potentially being watched by the owner. Her Monday nights were dedicated to the sommelier course, where she and Miles sat side by side, tasting wines and trading opinions that often evolved into heated debates. And after the classes came the dinners. What began as a single professional meal turned into a ritual that both eagerly anticipated. Liv tried to tell herself that she was just enjoying the opportunity to try restaurants that would normally be out of her budget. But the truth she was reluctant to admit was that she looked forward with growing anticipation to those conversations, to the intellectual challenge Miles represented, and to the way he looked at her, as if she were a mystery he was determined to solve. "You're different," Beatrice commented during a quiet shift at the cafe. "Lighter." "Must be the autumn air," Liv replied evasively, concentrating on cleaning the espresso machine with more dedication than necessary. This autumn air has a first and last name, it seems," Beatrice teased, "and owns a car that costs more than 5 years of our salary." Liv blushed. "It's just a professional course." "Sure, and I'm the Queen of England," Beatrice laughed. "Just be careful, Liv. Men like Miles Vaughn don't usually get serious about, well, people like us." Beatrice's words echoed in Liv's mind for days. She knew her colleague was right. Miles and she belonged to different worlds. But that didn't stop her heart from pounding when, on the 4th Monday, he invited her somewhere different after class. "I thought we could use a change of scenery," Miles explained, guiding his car out of the city. "There's a place I want to show you." Liv felt a knot in her stomach as she realized they were going to his house. The Vaughn residence was an elegant construction with rustic touches strategically positioned on a hill overlooking the region's valleys. "My father is traveling," Miles explained as he parked. "I thought we could have dinner here. I promise I cook better than you might think." The house, inside, was a curious reflection of its inhabitants. Modern, minimalist spaces intertwined with cozy corners full of books and curious objects that Liv imagined were Arthur's collections. "So this is where the powerful Miles Vaughn lets his guard down?" Liv commented, looking at family photos discreetly arranged on a shelf. "Everyone needs a place to just be human," he replied, leading her to the surprisingly functional kitchen. Liv was impressed to see Miles move with ease through the space, preparing a mushroom risotto while a bottle of wine breathed on the counter. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" she asked, accepting the glass he offered. "My mother insisted that every man should know his way around a kitchen." Miles smiled nostalgically, and after she passed, cooking became a way to keep her present. There was a vulnerability in his voice that Liv had never heard before. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "It was a long time ago," he replied, turning his attention back to the risotto. "And you? Where does your love for food?" Liv told him about Sundays in the kitchen with her grandmother, learning traditional recipes and later experimenting with her own combinations. "For me, food is connection," she explained. "It's a form of universal language." As they dined on the veranda overlooking the city lights, the conversation flowed into more personal territories. Miles spoke about the challenge of expanding the family business without losing its essence. Liv shared her dreams of one day having her own cafe, a space that would combine her passion for gastronomy with a welcoming environment for the community. It was then that an insistent meow interrupted the conversation. An elegant Siamese cat with piercing blue eyes emerged, staring at Liv with curiosity. "This is Simba," Miles introduced, as the feline gracefully leaped onto his lap. "The real owner of the house." Liv smiled, holding out her hand for the cat to sniff. "He's beautiful." "And extremely selective," Miles commented, watching with surprise as Simba abandoned his lap to investigate Liv more closely. He rarely approaches strangers. Maybe I'm not such a stranger then, Liv replied, feeling a wave of tenderness as the cat settled comfortably beside her. Something changed that night. As Miles drove her home, the silence between them had a different weight, charged with unsaid possibilities. When they stopped in front of her aunt's house, Liv felt her heart race when he leaned in her direction. But instead of the kiss she secretly expected, Miles just gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for tonight," he said softly, "for letting me be just Miles, not Mr. Vaughn." Liv felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. "Thank you for the dinner," she replied, getting out of the car before she could do something impulsive. The next morning, an arrangement of exotic flowers arrived at the Birchwood Cafe, addressed to her. The card read only, "For the woman who teaches wine to the coffee chain owner. See you Monday." "Just a professional course, huh?" Beatrice teased, raising her eyebrows at the blush on Liv's face. That night, Liv found her aunt organizing costumes for another of her themed events. "Darling, I need your opinion. 16th century French or Victorian era for the ball?" Liv barely registered the question, her mind still lost in the hours with Miles. "Liv?" Clara insisted, studying her niece with sharp eyes. "Oh, I know that look. It's the same one I had when I met your Uncle Matthew. Be careful, my dear. Hearts are fragile when exposed to dizzying heights." "I don't know what you're talking about," Liv deflected. But she knew her aunt was right. She was falling, fast and dangerously, for a man who represented everything she had always criticized: privilege, power, a world where money determined value. And most frighteningly, a part of her was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, Miles was falling too. What she didn't know was that as she contemplated these possibilities, forces were already in motion to test this nascent connection in ways neither of them could predict. The relationship between Liv and Miles evolved like a fine wine, complex, surprising, and with notes that only revealed themselves with time. The sommelier course was nearly halfway through, and what had begun as a power play was transforming into something neither of them dared to name. In class, they maintained a professional facade that gradually dissolved during the dinners that invariably followed. Liv, normally so defensive and independent, found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone. Miles, in turn, revealed layers that the corporate world never glimpsed. His sharp humor, his passion for classic literature, his occasional moments of insecurity. "My father gets back from his trip tomorrow," Miles commented one evening. As they walked through a park after dinner, autumn was advancing, covering the ground in golden leaves. "He's anxious to meet you. Apparently Simba won't stop talking about you." Liv laughed. "Your cat is a gossip then?" "And the worst kind." Miles smiled, taking her hand as if it were the most natural gesture in the world. Liv felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold night air. "Would it be asking too much for you to have dinner with us tomorrow?" "I promise my father will behave." "Mostly. Meet the father?" "That sounds serious, Mr. Vaughn," Liv teased, trying to mask the nervousness the proposal caused. "What if it is?" Miles' expression suddenly turned serious. They stopped walking, and he turned to face her. "What if I told you I've never felt this way about anyone before?" Liv swallowed hard. Those words were simultaneously everything she wanted to hear and her greatest fear. "I'd say you need to broaden your social circle," she replied defensively. Miles was unfazed by the evasion. "Liv Bennett, you are the most frustrating, stubborn, and fascinating person I have ever met. And with every day that passes, I become more certain that I want you in my life. Not just as the barista who argues with me about the ideal coffee temperature." Liv felt her heart race. A voice in her head, one that sounded suspiciously like Beatrice, warned her about the differences between their worlds, about the risks of getting involved with her boss, about fairy tales that don't exist in real life. But another part of her, more insistent and persuasive, whispered that some chances only come once in a lifetime. "Does your father like lasagna?" she asked finally, a hesitant smile on her lips. "Because if I'm going to meet him, I need to impress him with something special." The smile that lit up Miles's face was worth every second of doubt. He leaned in, and this time the kiss was soft, almost reverent at first, but quickly deepened into something more intense, as if both were finally releasing feelings held back for weeks. When they parted, breathless, Miles rested his forehead against hers. I think I just broke every rule about workplace relationships. Technically, we're in a park. Liv smiled against his lips. And since when do you care about rules? Dinner the next night was a surreal experience. Liv, who had expected to feel intimidated in the presence of Miles's father, found an immediate ally in Arthur Vaughn. In his 70s, he had the same expressive eyes as his son, but with laugh lines that spoke of a life lived intensely. At last, I meet the famous Liv, Arthur exclaimed, kissing her hand with an old-fashioned flourish. My son and Simba haven't stopped talking about you, and when those two agree on something, I pay attention. Dad, Miles warned, but his tone was affectionate. What? A lifetime building an empire for you? I can't at least meet the woman who managed to penetrate that heart of yours? Arthur winked at Liv. Come, my dear, I want to show you embarrassing photos of Miles when he was a grumpy little boy. The dinner was punctuated by Arthur's fantastic stories, some clearly exaggerated, others so extraordinary they seemed invented, but all told with such charm and conviction that it was impossible not to be enchanted. Once, on a trip to Morocco, he recounted as they savored the lasagna Liv had prepared, I met a merchant who swore he owned a magic lamp, told me it had granted 3 wishes to each generation of his family for centuries. And you bought it, of course? Liv laughed, already familiar with the pattern of his stories. Naturally. Any sensible man would do the same, Arthur replied with comical seriousness. And look, my first wish was for a long and healthy life. Here I am in my 70s playing tennis 3 times a week. The second was for a son who combined intelligence with a good heart. And look at Miles. The third, he paused dramatically. Well, the third I'm still saving. You never know when you'll need a miracle. Miles rolled his eyes, but Liv noted the underlying affection. It was clear that, despite the eccentricities, Arthur was the bedrock of Miles's life, just as Aunt Clara was for her. Later, as Miles drove her home, Liv felt an unusual peace. The evening had been perfect, in a way she never would have imagined possible weeks ago. Your father is amazing, she commented, leaning back in the passenger seat. Now I understand where you get your charm. He adored you, Miles replied, taking her hand, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. When they arrived at Clara's house, Liv hesitated before getting out of the car. My aunt is organizing one of her themed balls on Saturday. Victorian era. Puffy dresses, fans, the whole package. It would be great if you came as my date. She suddenly felt vulnerable, as if she were exposing more than just an invitation. Miles's smile lit up his face. Liv Bennett, are you asking me on an official date? I'm inviting you to make a fool of yourself wearing period clothing, she corrected, but her smile betrayed her happiness. It would be an honor, he replied, leaning in to kiss her. Life finally seemed to be aligning for Liv. The sommelier course was proving to be a transformative experience. Her relationship with Miles was blossoming, and even at work, things seemed better. Frank, the manager, had subtly offered her the position of head barista. It was just when everything seemed perfect that the first storm cloud appeared on the horizon. The morning after the dinner with Arthur, Liv arrived at the Birchwood Cafe to find a stranger talking to Frank, well-dressed and with an undisguisable air of authority. Ah, Liv, good, you're here. Frank seemed nervous. This is Mr. Stephen Aldrich, a representative from the corporate group negotiating the purchase of the Birchwood chain. Liv's stomach sank. Purchase? Just a possibility at this stage. The man extended his hand with a calculated smile, but a very promising one. Our company has a strong interest in expanding into the premium coffee sector, and Birchwood has exactly the profile we're looking for. Liv shook his hand mechanically, her mind processing the implications. If the Birchwood Cafe was sold, what would happen to the employees? To her and Miles? Why hadn't he mentioned anything about a possible sale? Mr. Aldrich is conducting a preliminary assessment of all units, Frank explained. Liv, could you show him our preparation processes? You're our best barista. For the next hour, Liv automatically demonstrated each step of the process, answering Aldrich's questions while a growing sense of betrayal settled in her chest. Miles had talked about expansion, about new projects, but never about selling the business he claimed to love so much. When she finally got a moment alone, she typed a message to Miles. We need to talk today. The reply came almost immediately. Did something happen? I can meet you after your shift. Liv stared at her phone screen, anger and confusion warring within her. How could he pretend nothing was happening? Was it all? The course, the dinners, the intimate moments, just an elaborate distraction while he planned to sell the business he claimed to love. Liv, is everything okay? Beatrice asked, noticing her distraught expression. I don't know, she answered honestly, putting her phone away. I really don't know. When her shift ended, Liv found Miles waiting outside, leaning against his car with a worried expression. What happened? He asked as soon as he saw her, moving to hug her. Liv took a step back, maintaining the distance. Why didn't you tell me you're selling the Birchwood Cafe? The genuine confusion on Miles's face caught her off guard. What are you talking about? Stephen Aldrich was here today, evaluating the cafe for a potential purchase. Liv crossed her arms defensively. Frank said he represents a group interested in the whole chain. Miles's expression quickly shifted from confusion to understanding and then to something that looked like amusement. Aldrich was here today? This isn't funny, Miles. People's jobs are on the line. My job is. Liv felt her anger rise at his apparent lack of seriousness. Liv, I am not selling the Birchwood Cafe, Miles stated, his tone now firm. Stephen Aldrich has been trying to buy my operations for months and I have refused every offer. If he was here today, it was without my knowledge or authorization. Liv hesitated, studying his face for any sign of a lie. Then why did Frank receive him like it was official? Well, because Stephen is a very convincing opportunist. Miles sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. And because there are people who would very much like me to sell. What people? Liv asked, her voice softer now, the initial anger beginning to give way to doubt. It's a long story. Miles looked around. Can we talk somewhere else? I promise I'll explain everything. Minutes later, they were in a small coffee shop across town, neutral territory, as Liv had insisted. With a cup of coffee between his hands, Miles began his explanation. When I inherited the business from my grandfather, it was just one cafe. Turning it into a successful chain required capital, partners, and some compromises. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have minority shareholders who have been pushing for a sale for years. The market is hot and they want to cash out. But you're the majority shareholder, Liv concluded. Yes, but that doesn't stop them from trying. Stephen works for one of those shareholders, and apparently, he decided to take a more direct approach. Liv absorbed the information, feeling simultaneously relieved and foolish for having doubted him so quickly. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Miles sighed deeply. Because for the last few months, for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about business when I was with you. You were, he searched for the right word, my escape. The person I could just be Miles with, not the businessman, not the heir, not the target of others' ambitions. The sincerity in his voice disarmed Liv completely. I'm sorry I doubted you. No, you had every right. Miles reached across the table, taking her hand. But I need you to know something, Liv. What we have, what we're building, is real for me. Maybe it started as curiosity or even a game, but it's become so much more than I ever imagined possible. Liv felt her heart quicken. The anger had completely dissipated, replaced by a warm feeling spreading through her chest. For me too, she admitted softly. The relief on Miles's face was palpable. So, am I still invited to your aunt's ball? Liv laughed, the tense moment completely broken. Only if you promise not to laugh at my ridiculously puffy dress. I would never laugh, Miles replied with exaggerated solemnity. I will be the perfect Victorian gentleman. Then, with a roguish smile, he added, besides, I can't wait to see you in a corset. Liv felt her face flush intensely. Are you sure you want to deal with my aunt? She's going to want to know your intentions, probably demand a wedding date, and definitely tell embarrassing stories about me. Considering you've already faced my father and his fantastic stories, it seems only fair, Miles replied, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture that made Liv wonder how she had resisted him for so long. What neither of them knew, as they rebuilt their freshly shaken trust, was that Stephen Aldrich was not a man to accept defeat easily, and that the incident at the cafe was just the beginning of a much more elaborate plan to force Miles to sell his empire, no matter the cost. The Imperial Ballroom, rented by Aunt Clara for her, extravagant Victorian ball was resplendent with period decorations. Crystal chandeliers, lush floral arrangements, and velvet curtains created the perfect atmosphere for the guests, all dressed to the nines, to feel transported to the 19th century. Liv observed it all with a mixture of embarrassment and admiration. Her aunt, for all her eccentricities, knew how to throw a memorable event. She adjusted the bodice of her turquoise gown for the 10th time, feeling simultaneously ridiculous and strangely elegant. "Stop fussing with the dress, dear. You look stunning," Clara said, approaching with two elderly gentlemen in tow. Dressed as an authentic Victorian socialite with a burgundy gown and an elaborate feathered hairstyle, she was in her element. "These are Professors Gabriel and Daniel, scholars of the Victorian era who have graciously agreed to lend authenticity to our little event." Liv greeted the gentleman politely, while her eyes continued to scan the ballroom for Miles. He had promised to arrive early, but it was already an hour past the start of the party. "Your young man hasn't arrived yet?" Clara asked shrewdly after the professors moved on. "He must be stuck in traffic," Liv replied, trying to sound casual. Clara murmured, unconvinced. "Well, while we wait, how about you tell me more about this relationship you've been trying to hide from your old aunt?" Liv blushed. "I wasn't hiding it. I just wasn't sure what there was to tell. And now you are?" Clara arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. "Now I know it's more serious than I ever imagined it could be," Liv admitted, surprising herself with her own honesty. "He's different than I expected. Kinder, more vulnerable. And with him, I feel like I can be completely myself." Clara's smile softened. "Oh, my dear, do you know what your grandmother used to say? That true love isn't when we find someone perfect, but when we perfectly see someone's imperfections and still choose to love them." Liv felt a lump in her throat. Love. Was that really what she was feeling? The word seemed simultaneously intimidating and absolutely right. At that moment, a stir at the ballroom entrance caught her attention. Miles had arrived, and the sight of him made her heart leap. Dressed as an authentic Victorian gentleman with a tailcoat, waistcoat, and cravat perfectly fitted, he looked like he had stepped directly out of the pages of a period romance. But it wasn't his flawless appearance that made Liv hold her breath. It was the expression on his face when his eyes found hers across the crowd. A mixture of admiration, desire, and something deeper. Something that made the world around them disappear for a moment. "I think I just witnessed the look that inspired sonnets through the ages," Clara murmured beside her. "Go on. Your gentleman awaits." Liv crossed the ballroom as if floating, vaguely aware of the looks and whispers that followed her. When she finally stood face to face with Miles, words failed her. "You are..." Miles seemed equally speechless, his eyes tracing the gown that highlighted Liv's waist and left her shoulders partially bare. "There isn't an adequate adjective." "You don't look so bad yourself," Liv managed to say, adjusting the lapel of his tailcoat in an intimate gesture that made several guests raise their eyebrows. "My apologies for the delay," Miles said, offering her his arm. "I had an unexpected setback." Something in his tone alerted Liv. "What kind of setback?" "The kind that can wait," he replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Tonight is about us, not business." Before Liv could press him, the orchestra Clara had hired began to play a waltz, and Miles bowed formally. "Ms. Bennet, would you grant me the honor of this dance?" And just like that, as if in a fairy tale, Liv found herself spinning in the arms of the man who had turned her life upside down in a matter of weeks. Miles danced with the same confidence he conducted his business, guiding her across the floor with a precision and grace she never imagined he possessed. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, impressed. "My mother insisted on dance lessons when I was a teenager," he replied, spinning her expertly. "At the time, I thought it was torture. Now I'm eternally grateful to her." The night unfolded like a dream. Miles charmed Aunt Clara with his genuine attention to her stories of period balls, and he chatted with the professors about Victorian literature, revealing a knowledge that surprised everyone. And most importantly, he didn't leave Liv's side for a moment, treating her with a devotion that did not go unnoticed by the other guests. It was only when they stepped out onto the balcony for a moment of privacy that Liv again noticed the shadow in his eyes. "Now are you going to tell me what really happened today?" she asked, leaning against the stone balustrade. The night was cool, and Miles gently placed his jacket over her shoulders. "I didn't want to ruin the evening," he sighed. "You won't," Liv assured him. "But we're partners now, aren't we? Partners share the problems." The term partners made Miles smile genuinely. "Yes, we are." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Stephen Aldrich hasn't given up. Today, I received a formal offer to buy, backed by 3 of my 5 minority shareholders. Can they force a sale, even as minorities? Not directly, but they can make things complicated. Miles ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Liv now recognized as a sign of worry. And Aldrich is willing to play dirty. He's been digging into my business, looking for vulnerabilities. And did he find any? Miles hesitated briefly. All businesses have gray areas, Liv. Decisions made under pressure, compromises made out of necessity. Nothing illegal, but things that, taken out of context, could look questionable. Liv felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the night breeze. He's threatening you? Let's just say he's strongly suggesting that a friendly sale would be less complicated for everyone involved. Miles replied, his voice now tense. Including for those close to me. People like me, Liv concluded, finally understanding the depth of his concern. Miles turned to face her directly, taking her hands in his. Liv, if my problems affect you in any way, I would never forgive myself. Maybe we should take a step back until this is resolved. Liv felt as if she'd been slapped. Is that what you want? To push me away at the first sign of trouble? Of course not. The intensity in his voice surprised her. I want to protect you. Miles Vaughn, you listen to me. Liv squared her shoulders, her eyes locked on his. I have spent my entire life being protected. By my parents, by their expectations, by the limits they set. I chose my own path precisely so I could make my own decisions, face my own risks. Don't you dare decide for me what I can and cannot handle. A tense silence followed her words. Then, to her surprise, Miles began to laugh. A genuine laugh full of relief and admiration. You are extraordinary, you know that. The most stubborn, courageous, and absolutely incredible woman I've ever met. He cupped her face in his hands gently, and I love you for it. I love every stubborn, challenging, wonderful part of you, Liv Bennett. The words hit Liv like a wave, leaving her momentarily breathless. You love me? Desperately, Miles confirmed, his face now completely open, vulnerable. I know it sounds crazy. We've known each other for such a short time, but I feel like I've waited my entire life to find someone who truly sees me. Not the name, not the money. Just me. Liv felt unexpected tears well in her eyes. I love you too, she admitted, the truth finally crystal clear in her heart. And we will face whatever Stephen Aldrich tries to do together. The kiss that sealed this declaration was different from all the others. A promise, a commitment. The beginning of something both knew was bigger than themselves. What they didn't know, as they sealed their love under the stars, was that Aldrich's plan was already in motion. The next morning, Liv would arrive at the Birchwood Cafe to find the place locked, an audit notice on the door, and an official notification informing all staff of a temporary furlough, pending investigation. The battle for the future of Miles's empire and for their relationship was just beginning. Epilogue. 6 months later, the aroma of freshly roasted coffee and fresh bread filled the sunny morning air. Liv adjusted the small floral arrangement on the rustic wooden counter, observing with satisfaction the welcoming space she and Miles had created together. The earth-toned walls displayed black and white photographs of coffee producers from around the world, while large windows allowed natural light to flood the room. The Link Cafe, named to honor the way their lives had intertwined, was about to open its doors for the first time, and Liv could hardly contain the nervous excitement she felt. Nervous? Miles asked, coming up behind her and wrapping her in a hug. Terrified, Liv admitted, leaning back against his chest. What if no one comes? What if too many people come? What if they hate the coffee? Then we'll have a great story for our first day, he replied, kissing the top of her head. Besides, we have an extremely critical Siamese cat who has approved everything so far. As if summoned, Simba strolled majestically into the cafe, inspecting every corner of his new territory with piercing blue eyes. The feline had adapted surprisingly well to the move into the apartment Liv and Miles now shared above the cafe. The last 6 months had been a roller coaster that tested both of them to their limits. The battle against Stephen Aldrich and Miles's dissatisfied minority shareholders had turned into a media storm when allegations of financial irregularities were leaked to the press. For weeks, the Vaughn empire was under relentless scrutiny, with the Birchwood Cafe closed and its employees in limbo. Liv had remained steadfast by Miles's side, even when well-meaning friends like Beatrice suggested she was sinking with the ship. Together, they found the documents that proved the alleged irregularities were, in fact, accounting manipulations carried out by one of the minority shareholders himself, who had conspired with Aldrich to force the sale. The legal victory came at a price. Exhausted by the corporate battles and disillusioned with the greed he had witnessed, Miles made a surprising decision. He sold the majority of his operations, keeping only the original Birchwood Cafe, which reopened with all employees rehired. The rest of the funds were directed toward a new dream, one that included Liv as an equal partner. Your father and Aunt Clara are settled at the corner table, Miles commented, checking his watch. Ready to be our first official customers in exactly 3 minutes. Liv smiled, seeing Arthur and Clara chatting animatedly. The unlikely pair had developed an instant friendship, based on a shared love of exaggerated stories and extravagant celebrations. To Liv's feigned horror and Miles's genuine amusement, the two now organized monthly themed events together that had become the talk of the town. I still can't believe they're planning a great Gatsby party for our 6-month anniversary. Liv shook her head as she adjusted her custom apron with the cafe's logo. Considering my father has already sourced a vintage car and your aunt is researching flapper dresses, I think it's best we accept our fate. Miles laughed. The jingle of the bell on the door made them both turn. To Liv's surprise, it wasn't just Arthur and Clara approaching the counter. It was Beatrice, accompanied by all their former colleagues from the Birchwood Cafe. We couldn't miss the grand opening, Beatrice explained with a warm smile, hugging Liv. Besides, Frank gave us all the day off, especially for this. Tears welled in Liv's eyes. You guys are amazing. Well, some of us were rooting for this happy ending from the start, Beatrice said with a wink, even when a certain stubborn barista insisted she hated the arrogant boss. The cafe soon filled with laughter, conversation, and the clinking of cups. Liv and Miles moved in perfect sync behind the counter, complimenting each other with the ease that only comes from deep understanding and mutual trust. During a brief quiet moment, Miles pulled Liv close. Happy? He asked, his voice soft amid the hubbub. More than I ever imagined possible, she answered sincerely. The journey hadn't been easy, but every obstacle overcome had only strengthened the bond between them. Miles smiled, that same smile that still made her heart race. You know, sometimes I think about that first day, when you fought with me over the coffee. And I think about the arrogant customer who almost made me lose my job. Liv teased, adjusting his tie in an intimate gesture. If we could go back, I'd do it all exactly the same, Miles confessed, taking her hands in his. Liv leaned in, stealing a brief kiss. I might have been a little less combative, she admitted with a smile. But since when do we like things easy? The clinking of a spoon against a glass interrupted the moment. All eyes turned to Arthur, who had begun an impromptu speech. Attention, please! As a proud father and natural-born storyteller, he announced with a flourish, Many years ago, I used my third wish from the Moroccan magic lamp. Liv and Miles exchanged amused glances as Arthur launched into another of his fanciful tales, this time including a prophecy about a cafe that would unite stubborn hearts. He is absolutely making this up on the spot, Miles whispered, hugging Liv by the shoulders. Like all the best fairy tales, she replied, leaning against him. But you know what? Sometimes reality is better than fiction. And as they looked at the small community they had built, friends, family, and a shared future born from the most unlikely of encounters, both silently agreed that some stories, no matter how unbelievable they seem, are perfectly real. Especially the ones that start with an argument about coffee.